I want you to imagine something for a second.
Okay.
Imagine walking onto a car lot in the Greater Toronto area right now.
Oh, boy.
Right. The gravel is, crunching under your feet, the sun is shining, and you are totally ready to make a deal.
Yeah, you've done your research.
Exactly. So you walk up to this sensible, 3-year-old crossover, and you check the price tag hanging from the mirror, and you genuinely think there's been a typo.
A massive typo.
Yeah. You start doing the math in your head thinking, wait, this used car costs almost as much as I paid for my first house deposit.
It is a profound sticker shock. And, I mean, it's a scenario playing out on lots from Mississauga to Oshawa literally every single day.
It really is wild out there.
Yeah, buyers are walking in expecting the historical norm, right?
Right.
Where a used car offers a huge discount. But instead, they're just hitting this brick wall of unprecedented pricing.
So welcome to this deep dive. Today, our mission is to decode this absolute chaos. We're forecasting the Canada and GTA car market from right now all the way to the end of 2026.
That's right. We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We're looking at everything driving this, from supply and demand to interest rates to the uncertainty around the U.S. and Canada trade tariffs.
And to do that, we are pulling from a really robust stack of industry data.
Oh, yeah, a massive stack.
We're looking at Auto Trader's Q1 2026 Price Index, the Clutch Used Car Pricing Report, Carfax Canada's latest market insights, TD Economics 2026 Auto Outlook, and some ground-level dealer financing data, too.
It's a lot of research. But before we get into the weeds, let's set some ground rules. We are here to analyze these trends for your education and entertainment.
Absolutely.
This deep dive is not financial, legal, or professional buying advice. We're looking at the macro forces, but always do your own research before you sign any paperwork on a vehicle.
That is vital to keep in mind because, well, while the market feels chaotic and, frankly, deeply frustrating for anyone trying to replace a vehicle right now,
Oh, totally frustrating.
it actually isn't broken. When we look at the data, the market is reacting entirely logically to a really wild, unprecedented set of competing economic pressures.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if I'm the person standing on that gravel lot, the biggest question in my head is just, why are cars still so impossibly expensive?
Right.
I mean, the pandemic supply chain issues were years ago. We shouldn't still be feeling this, right?
Well, to understand the used car market, you actually have to look at the new car market first.
Okay.
Right now, the average new vehicle in Canada costs nearly $64,000.
Wait, 64,000.
Yeah. In Ontario specifically, it's hovering around 63,541.
That's not for a luxury SUV, right? That's just the average.
That is just the mathematical average.
Yeah.
And it's a price point that entirely excludes a massive segment of the working population,
I mean, I would think so, yeah.
which naturally leads to demand destruction in that sector. Because of that price ceiling, new car sales actually dropped 8.2% year over year this past March. Consumers simply cannot afford them. Or they're, looking at the financing math and refusing to take on that much debt.
Which makes sense.
Right. Which leads to an obvious shift.
Huh.
The buyers who originally set out to buy a brand new Toyota RAV4 or a Honda CR-V, they don't just disappear.
No, they turn around, walk out of the showroom, and go straight onto the used car lot.
Exactly. Which creates what economists call the substitution effect. You suddenly have a massive wave of highly qualified prime buyers.
People with good incomes and great credit.
Yeah, those exact people. They're flooding the used lots in places like Hamilton, Brampton, Woodstock. And that sudden surge in demand from affluent buyers is keeping used car prices artificially high and completely flat.
It's like a popular restaurant, right, where the main dining room, the new cars, raised its prices so ridiculously high that everyone just got up and rushed the patio.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
The patio being the used car market. But now, because everyone is out there, you can't get a seat on the patio either. The demand didn't evaporate, it just aggressively relocated.
The data strongly supports your patio analogy, actually. According to the Clutch report, the national average for a used car is sitting around $34,139.
Still so high.
And that's actually up 3.3% year over year. And it's been stubbornly flat for months. Auto Trader's broader data pegs it even higher, around $39,900 nationally.
Jeez.
And over $38,400 in Ontario. So that plateau we're seeing isn't a sign of a healthy, balanced market where supply meets demand organically.
Right, it's more like a bottleneck.
It is the visual representation of two massive forces. highly price-sensitive buyers and extremely tight inventory just crashing into each other and remaining locked in a stalemate.
But if there's this gridlock and so many buyers are crowding the used lots, waving their checkbooks, why aren't dealers just stocking more used cars to soak up that demand?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Like, where are all the cars?
This brings us to what we could call the ghost of 2020.
A pandemic hangover.
Exactly. The inventory crunch we're feeling today in 2026 is actually a downstream hangover. If you think back to 2020 through 2023, the automotive industry experienced, pandemic lockdown.
Severe semiconductor shortages.
Yeah, and assembly lines sitting completely empty for months on end.
Millions of new cars were simply never built.
Millions. And the lifeblood of the used car market is the 3 to 5-year-old vehicle coming off a lease or being traded in by its first owner.
Oh, right. So if it wasn't built back then...
So if a car wasn't built in 2021, it cannot magically appear on a used lot in Mississauga in 2026. The physical supply just does not exist.
Wow, that's a huge gap in the pipeline.
It is. Industry experts looking at these manufacturing gaps, they don't expect inventory to fully normalize to pre-pandemic levels until at least 2027.
Though, to be fair to the sources, Carfax did have a tiny glimmer of hope in their latest numbers.
They did, yeah.
They showed that March 2026 had about 235,500 used listings across the country.
They did note that uptick. And that's the highest supply level we've seen since August 2025.
Okay, that's something.
But economists still classify this as a structurally constrained market. It's marginally better than last year, but nowhere near historical norms.
Right.
And even when you do manage to track down the right car, you immediately hit the affordability wall.
Financing, which is a whole other nightmare for buyers. Now, wait, my brain is kind of breaking on this financing piece. Let's look at the numbers.
Okay, let's do it.
The Bank of Canada held its overnight rate at 2.25% in March 2026. 2.25%.
Yeah.
So how on earth is a guy with a decent job walking into a dealership and getting quoted 8%, 10%, or even 30% for a used car loan? Are the banks just punishing people for needing to commute to work?
What's fascinating here is the underlying mechanics of lending risk. We tend to conflate the Bank of Canada's policy rate with consumer loan rates, but you really have to separate them.
Okay, how so?
The overnight rate is 2.25%, yes. But lenders aren't just looking at the baseline cost of borrowing money. They are intensely evaluating the specific asset they are financing.
The $34,000 used car.
Exactly that asset.
Okay.
Because car prices are at historic, arguably inflated highs, the severity of loss for a bank is much, much steeper if a borrower defaults today compared to a decade ago.
Oh, I see.
Think about the math. If you default on a $15,000 car, the bank repossesses it, sells it at auction, and takes a mild loss.
Right.
If you default on a $40,000 used car, and the broader market suddenly normalizes and that car's value drops to $25,000.
The bank takes a massive, unrecoverable hit.
Exactly. Lenders are terrified of that depreciation cliff.
Yeah.
So they are pricing that future risk heavily into the loans they issue today.
Ah, so they're essentially charging you a massive premium up front because they are betting the car won't be worth the loan amount in 3 years.
Yeah.
They're hedging their bets on your dime.
That is the financial mechanism at play. For prime borrowers, people with great credit and solid income in Ontario, you're looking at rates from 6.99% to 9.99%.
That's still so high for prime.
And for near prime or subprime borrowers, the rate jumps drastically from 12.9% all the way up to 29.99%.
30%. That's credit card territory.
It is. When you combine those heavy interest rates with the inflated initial price of the cars, you arrive at a staggering reality for the consumer. The average monthly car payment in Canada is now approaching $1,000.
$1,000 a month, just to have a reliable car in the driveway to get your kids to school.
It's intense.
So buyers are stretched to their absolute limit. But the cruel irony is that automakers who are looking at these same tapped-out consumers are also looking at a new storm brewing on the horizon.
Right.
And their reaction is making the supply issue even worse.
You're referring to the CUSMA review.
Yes. The Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement. It governs almost every single vehicle and car part sold in North America, and there is a mandatory review slated for July 2026.
Yeah, that's coming up fast.
And the mere threat of this review and potential tariffs is already causing chaos on the ground here in Canada.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it It requires understanding how deeply integrated the North American auto manufacturing market actually is. Canada exports roughly 90% of its auto production to the U.S.
90%.
But
Wow.
it isn't just about shipping a finished car across the border. A single car part, say an engine component, might cross the border 5 or 6 times during the manufacturing process.
Back and forth, over and over.
Exactly. Currently, the effective U.S. tariff on Canadian-produced autos is hovering in the 15 to 20% range. And those tariffs compound with every crossing, adding real-world costs to the consumer.
Right.
In 2025 alone, tariffs added approximately $830 to the price of the average used vehicle in Canada.
Because if the new cars cost more to build and export, that price pressure trickles all the way down the line to the used lot.
Precisely.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Automakers are not waiting for the July 2026 review to see what happens. They are preemptively cutting production right now.
Yeah, we're already seeing it.
GM's Oshawa plant reduced a shift. The Stellantis plant in Brampton remains completely idled. TD Economics is forecasting that Canadian vehicle production will fall by 4% this year, and new sales will drop 4.3% to 1.9 million units.
And that reflects the harsh reality of global supply chains. Automakers have to plan their capital expenditures quarters and years in advance.
Right.
They're observing the geopolitical trade, uncertainty, evaluating it strictly from an economic cost analysis perspective, and deciding it's simply too risky to run their plants at full capacity.
But the strategy feels so counterintuitive. It's like an airline preemptively canceling flights because they see a storm on the radar.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
They'd rather ground the planes and take a small loss today than risk a catastrophic, expensive mess in the air tomorrow.
That is an incredibly accurate way to frame it. For the automakers, grounding the planes preserves capital in a highly uncertain regulatory environment.
Right. And just a reminder, we are impartially reporting the economic data here without taking a political stance on the tariffs.
Absolutely. The data just clearly demonstrates that U.S. and Canadian trade friction directly and immediately reduces the number of cars rolling off assembly lines, which means fewer cars sitting on your local lot.
Okay, so with all these massive macroeconomic forces colliding, trade tariffs, lingering pandemic hangovers, and $1,000 monthly payments, how is this actually changing consumer behavior? What are people actually buying?
It's creating some very distinct winners and losers in the market. Let's start with the staples.
The usual suspects.
Yeah, despite all this volatility, the most searched and sold vehicles haven't changed much. The Ford F-150, Toyota RAV-V, Honda CR-V, Ram 1500, and Honda Civic. These are the traditional internal combustion and hybrid workhorses. They hold their value because consumer trust and demand for them is absolutely bulletproof.
But then you look at the electric vehicle market, and wow, the data on EVs right now is shocking. The used EV market is softening incredibly fast.
Very fast.
Prices fell by $1,765 in just one single month, March 2026.
Yeah, almost $2,000 in a month.
I'm looking at this data and trying to make it make sense. Gas prices are spiking because of geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. Historically, when gas goes up, shouldn't used EVs be flying off the shelves?
You definitely expect that.
Why are they suddenly losing nearly $2,000 a month in value?
This raises an important question about how modern consumers weigh risk. It is a perfect storm of oversupply and consumer psychology. First, on the supply side, we are currently seeing a massive wave of off-lease EVs returning to the market.
Oh, because of the early adopters.
Exactly. Over 300,000 units are projected to hit the lots, representing a 200% year-over-year increase. The early adopters who leased expensive EVs 3 years ago are turning them in all at once, flooding the used lots.
So the supply suddenly spiked? But what about the demand side?
Yes, gas is expensive, which normally drives adoption, but consumers are also looking at the sticker price. The average EV on AutoTrader is still north of $60,000.
Wow.
And more importantly, consumers are holding their breath.
They're waiting for the Chinese EVs to hit the market.
That is the psychological barrier. There's widespread anticipation that highly competitive, significantly cheaper Chinese electric vehicles are about to enter the Canadian market.
Right.
And it isn't just that they are cheaper. The technology parity is extremely high, and consumers know it.
So these vehicles could drastically undercut that $60,000 average.
Exactly. If you're a buyer, why would you take out a 9% loan on a $60,000 3-year-old EV today when a brand new, equally capable and cheaper alternative might disrupt the market in 6 months?
You wouldn't.
Right. So buyers are simply pausing.
They're pausing on EVs, but they are absolutely rushing toward hybrids. The data showed hybrid searches on the Clutch platform skyrocketed 66% in just a 60-day window.
66% is huge.
It seems like the hybrid is the ultimate compromise vehicle right now. You get protection from the gas spikes without the anxiety of the EV depreciation cliff or worrying about the charging infrastructure.
That is precisely how the market views them. Hybrids are seeing demand vastly outpace supply. Because of that, you will rarely find a deal on a used RAV4 hybrid right now. You will pay a premium, and you'll likely have to fight another buyer for it.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've talked about a lot of big numbers, tariffs, and interest rates. Let's translate this into an actionable strategy, a practical playbook for the rest of 2026, depending on your position in the market.
Okay, let's start with the regular buyer.
Sure.
If your strategy is to hold on to your aging 2012 sedan and wait for a massive pre-pandemic price crash, the data suggests that isn't a viable plan.
Don't hold your breath.
Inventory will not materially recover until at least 2027, and perhaps later given the current production cuts at places like Oshawa and Brampton.
Right, the wait-and-see approach might just leave you waiting indefinitely while your repair bills pile up.
However, if you actively want an EV, the used market is actually a gold mine right now. Because of that rapid depreciation we discussed, you can let the original owner take the massive financial hit, and you can pick up a 3-year-old EV for a fraction of its original cost.
Oh, that's a great point. But if you want a hybrid, as we said, prepare for combat. You will pay a premium and you need to move fast.
Very fast.
What about the side hustlers, the people flipping cars or running small independent lots?
For flippers, the wholesale market dynamics are really interesting right now. The wholesale auction prices, which is what dealers pay each other, have started to soften slightly in early 2026.
Oh, really?
Yeah, dealers are a bit hesitant to overpay at auction. But the retail prices, what consumers pay on the lot, are staying flat.
Wait, if the dealers are buying the cars for less at auction, why aren't they lowering the retail price to compete for buyers?
Because inventory is still historically constrained. Dealers know there aren't enough cars to go around, so they don't have to lower the retail price to win your business.
Ah, I see.
They just keep the sticker price high and pocket the wider profit margin in the middle. But agility is key for them. They cannot afford to hold used EVs right now, as those vehicles are depreciating by the week.
Right, they'd be losing money just letting them sit.
Exactly. They need high turnover, high demand models, sticking to the staples, the Civic, the Corolla, the RAV4, and turning them quickly is the safest play.
And finally, for the small dealership owners out there, the data is screaming that financing is your biggest bottleneck.
It absolutely is.
You have fewer cars on your lot because of the tight inventory. You cannot afford to lose a sale because a buyer gets rejected for a loan or gets spooked by a 15% rate.
That is the operational reality. Dealerships need to aggressively market to those substitution buyers we talked about earlier.
Right.
Remember, these are people with good jobs, good credit, who just walked out of a new car dealership in total shock at a $64,000 price tag. They are prime borrowers.
So if a small dealer has the right financing partnerships in place to get those buyers approved quickly at a decent rate, they're going to close deals.
Yes, they will win the business.
It really is a high-stakes game of musical chairs right now. The GTA and broader Canadian auto market is being shaped by these long-tail pandemic supply gaps, the looming threat of CUSMA trade tariffs choking off future cars, and a consumer base that is completely exhausted by prices but still desperately needs to get to work.
It requires everyone, whether you're a buyer, a flipper, or a dealer, to be highly strategic. You can't just operate on gut feeling or historical norms anymore.
No, the old rules don't apply.
You have to follow where the data is pointing and understand the mechanisms driving the prices.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive into the 2026 auto market. But before we go, we always like to leave you with something to chew on.
Given everything we've unpacked today, the rapid depreciation of complex, expensive EVs, the looming threat of supply chain tariffs cutting off future inventory, and the incredibly high cost of borrowing raises an important question.
Let's hear it.
Are we about to see a paradigm shift in how we value vehicles? Are reliable, gas-powered, 5-year-old used cars about to transform from depreciating liabilities into premium legacy assets?
Legacy assets. Wow.
Next time you're walking that car lot and you see an old Honda Civic stubbornly holding its sticker price, ask yourself, is it just overpriced, or is it actually the safest investment on the lot?
That is a fascinating way to look at it. The trusty old Civic as a legacy asset. So next time you hear that gravel crunching under your feet and you see a price tag that looks like a typo, you'll know exactly the macro forces that put it there. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your curiosity sharp, keep questioning the data, and we will catch you on the next one.